All right. Welcome back to the Board Drill Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Kyle Bradburn. It's another Matless episode, but with me tonight is a special guest. It's Coach Kevin Sullivan, who is a staple of North Florida. I know you've coached in South Florida too as well, Coach, but, up here in North Florida, you're a very well-known coach. He was a former head coach. He coached for 39 total years, which includes time at Deerfield Beach, Atlantic High School in Port Orange, Jackson here in Jacksonville, and also Atlantic Coach. And Coach, real quick, before I welcome you to the show, two of those, you opened those schools, correct?
Yeah. Atlantic, Port Orange, Atlantic, we did it. And then we opened Atlantic Coast also. So it was
That's
sort of interesting that somebody said, you did it once. I said, no, I'm dumb enough to do it twice.
It's fantastic. Well, Coach, welcome to the show.
I love it. Love the audience.
So, super excited to have you here tonight. We talk with a lot of coaches and we talk a lot of X's and O's, and obviously it's very important with football. But I think the other thing we do is we get some coaches on here, some retired coaches, to talk about a handful of things I think are very important. Tonight, we're going to talk about developing assistants. And I think that's a really important piece. I'm a former head coach. I wasn't very good when I was a head coach, but we have a lot of first-time and young head coaches out there. And this is a question I get a lot. How do I find good coaches? And, Coach, I know that's a big piece of it, but I think part of that is also how do I develop good coaches too, correct?
Yeah, without a doubt. And really, probably one of the hardest jobs is finding assistant coaches. Number one, that you can trust. Number two, that are going to have your back through the good and the bad. And then also helping them get better. And a lot of coaches will get better on their own, but they've got to be steered to get better, and that was one of the things we tried to do as a staff in the offseason. Hey, we're going to go to University of Florida. I want you to go sit in there and with Charlie Strong at linebackers, that kind of stuff. And then they're like, well, Coach, I want to come and hit the golf ball and drink beer. I got a couple of nights away from the kids and everything. I'm like, yeah, we're going to do that. I said, but we've got to get our business taken care of that we take care of.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a great point. I was, I'm a football guy, right? And I would go to these clinics and I'm not a super, I'll talk and everything, and not a lot of people are going to believe me on this, but I don't want to go out and drink a bunch of beer with everybody. Like, I want to sit there for like 4 hours till midnight, maybe have 2 beers and like write on 8,000 napkins. And that's how I've always been, right?
Well, yeah, and that's sort of the cool thing about, so the old days, which they're not like that anymore. So the old days, we used to go to those clinics for a couple nights at a time, and it was great bonding with the staff. But it was also good because you would get more personalized with the college coaches in different areas. And we tried to go to different places. Miami one year, of course, Florida State, Florida, South Carolina one year, Georgia one year, just to get the staff out on a trip and enjoy our time. But again, I got so much more out of going to practice or spring practice, or, hey, we want to come over. You guys throw play action off or naked boot off of inside zone. And I want to see how you guys do it, teach it, that kind of stuff. So I would always take our guys and say, hey, I'm going to go over to Florida on Friday and I'm going to sit with the offense coordinator. He got an hour for me. I can watch film as long as I want, but he's got an hour for questions. So you want to come? And they'd tag along. And then, of course, it would be good. But I think a lot of that is sort of the camaraderie part as the coaches and the family part of the coaches. Now it's all online. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
You could get that stuff and they'll send you stuff online. If they know you, they'll send you stuff online, knowing you're not going to share it or whatnot. It was funny. I was up in Georgia a couple of years ago and sat in with Coach Schumann, the linebacker coach, after they won.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, look, because Pup was with me. And I should say, Pup took me with him. Said, Coach, you got to go. You got to go. We're going there in Clemson. We stayed at my buddies at Clemson. And so I got in there and they tell you things about, they just how they beat Alabama or Ohio State or wherever it was, and different little things, knowing that I'm not going to go out and say, hey, here's the deal, that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, and I think the other piece is they know it's going to end up on the internet sooner or later, so they're a little more willing to share it because somewhere, somehow, a lot of that stuff gets out. Because by the time it filters down to someone like me, clearly it's been out in public for a while.
Yeah,
because no one talks to me. So
Yeah, definitely. And that was the beauty of like when Coach Spurrier was coaching and everything, and you just ask him a question. He'd be like, "Hey, Sully, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna throw the smash route no matter what they're in coverage wise. And we're gonna complete it, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was a good time earlier on when everything wasn't so guarded and so,
Yeah.
you know, I got to tell you Urban Meyer stories and a lot of fun with Urban and Greg Madison and those guys. And it just became different. But the relationship part, I guess, is probably what's not as close as it used to be.
Yeah, no doubt. We see that time and time again. And just, the internet's just changed the way people interact. And COVID was a really cool time because everybody was able to get everybody on a Zoom and things. I mean, I remember at one point I'm on a Zoom one-on-one with DCs all across the country. And I'm like, I would never be able to get in a room with these guys. But I know we're getting a little off topic here. So let's kind of bring it back center. And that was my fault for getting us off topic there. All right, developing young coaches. All right, Coach. So you've been through it time and time again. Let's act like we're right now, right? We're here in the offseason. It's January. What is the plan for developing your coaches, especially the young ones in the offseason?
So I always try to give them a task. I would say, okay, I want you to go in and, we play, okay, Jackson, hey, we play Reigns every year. So I want you to go in and I want you to break down that film. And then next Monday, let's meet for an hour and let's talk about that. What you see, I could tell you what I saw. I could tell you what they've done to us in the past. And let's do that. So I always recommended our guys. I did it as a head coach. I went back and watched every game, every team we play, even if the coach got fired or he wasn't there anymore and they brought somebody new in. I always try to do that in the offseason because, in the season it's so hard. But that was one thing. So that's one thing I'd always tell our guys. And then watching film, you have to teach the young guys how to watch film. And so I was told by an old coach a long time ago that everybody is going to watch film differently because what you see and what I see are two different things. And that we used to get in these debates in the room and they're in 3-4 and I'm like, they're playing 50. They're in 5-2. They're in 5-2, cover 2, or rolling the safety. No, coach, they're in 3-4. I'm like, okay, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, to me, it's, well, how do you know they're running that? I'm like, well, that's what they've run for the 10 times we played them. They play. I don't know, a funny story. We were playing Mandarin one year, and that we called it pillow pass because their quarterback his last name was Pillow, and so we went on, and that's pillow pass. That's pillow. It was flat curl. It was off play action flat curl, right? So we just called it pillow pass because that's what the quarterback's done. It was easy. So we're going through. We're on about the 7th time. That's pillow pass, and then the DB coach is like, why do y'all keep calling it pillow pass? I'm like, what? I'm like, the quarterback's Pillow, and he's throwing the ball to the exact same route like 7 times already. So we're not going to say flat curl. We're just going to call it Pillow, and our kids will know pillow pass is flat curl. So everybody's different when they watch film. So
yeah, no, I think that makes great sense. And like you said, going back and self-scouting is such an underrated thing. And just like you said, early in my career, I never really thought about it. And this is when I'm a young coach. I'm like, who cares? Let's move on to the next year and all that stuff. But there's so much valuableness in going back and self-scouting and watching those things and breaking down, like you said, and just getting to know the history of the game. Because especially at the high school level, and I'd even argue at the college level, those coaches come back to those things, and sometimes they come back to something that's 2 or 3 years old, and you kind of remember it in your head. And we've even had coaches on this podcast talk about matchups. So like, I knew this coach was going to run this because he ran it 2 years ago on the left hash in this situation. Right. Like, there it is.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And we were run first, off our play actions. So everybody knew like we were going to do this. So about I don't know, maybe my 3rd year as a head coach, we're playing Olympic Heights. They're undefeated, second round of the playoffs. And we end up beating them. And after the game, I talked to their coach that I knew the next couple of days. And I'm like, hey, man, what did you see? He goes, when you were on the left, you were 95% running outside zone or toss, 95% from the left hash. And it blew me away. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? He goes, so we had like 6 games of you and you were 95%. And so when he told me that, it changed my mindset about, well, I've got to go back and do a better job. And I think as I got, and that's just experience too, no matter what, but I was a 3rd year head coach. We were pretty good, but I was like, oh man, we could have been better. And so that's when I started realizing you got downtime in January, because January, February to me was the worst times of the year. I hated January, February. Well,
Yeah.
actually, I liked it because we went to the convention the first weekend, had a good time, then came back. And it's just like the kids are the third 9 weeks, they're a pain in the butt. You're on them grinded. You're trying to lift and get going, and then there's nothing. But then you go, you know how it is. You go to spring break, you come back. Hey, next month it's spring ball.
Spring ball,
Everybody back excited. But I always felt that one area that was the worst time that we could. But that's one of the things I did during that time is I try to take a team game and a team a week or a team a day and break it down and try to go through everything.
Yeah, so when a young guy comes to you, he's like, all right, coach, I broke down reins. I see X, Y, and Z here. And maybe he's on the right track for a lot of it, but maybe you want him to really, you say like, hey, you need to be looking for, this and that. How do you go about that? Like, how does that meeting go?
Yeah, so I think I think I just talked to him. I said, okay, what'd you get? Well, they're 3-3, they're 3-3. Well, where do they like to bring the pressure? Are they always coming field? Are they always coming from the boundary? Are they coming to your strength? If you move a motion, those kind of little things as you go in and game plan. And I think that's all you did. To me, it was like, there's no wrong answer. I'm like, well, Coach, I didn't see that. I said, what didn't you see? Well, I didn't see them slanting on third and long. They just blocked 3 and dropped coverage 9 out of 10 times. Okay, great. But what did they do with the pressure? So I think you just try to help them and coach them on that. And I always told my guys, look, you may give me the suggestion like game week, like, Coach, I think we should do this. Maybe my wideout coach, like, Coach, we should just throw hitch. We should just go call it. Tell the quarterback anytime, give them the signal and throw hitch, because they're going to play so far off. And I always tell my guys, tell me all that stuff. I may not do it, but I listen. But I may not do it. Either I'm not comfortable, I don't like what you're doing. But that means I know that you're contributing. And that's the main thing. And I think nowadays that's what you just want people to feel involved. I know everybody wants a title nowadays. Back then, you just didn't get no title. You just showed up. We coached hard, coached our kids hard.
Yeah, so I think that's a great point, right? You talk about developing a young guy, and let's say you take some steps, and now, right, he's getting hungry and he's getting into it, coach. He's doing all the right things. He's clinicking, he's doing all this stuff, and now, you get the inevitable question, coach, what's the next step I need to do to get to the play calling responsibility? And how do you handle that? Because obviously that's something a lot of young coaches want, and a lot of coaches in general, right? They want to call plays because they feel like that's the big thing. Where is it at that point, whether you feel like that guy's ready or not? How do you teach him how to make that next step?
Well, I think the best thing to do is put them up in the box. I think they get a so much better point and better feel of the game, even though a lot of guys want to be on the side and be able to talk to the kids. But I think putting them up in the box really helps. And then they're on the headsets and they can hear, hey, where are we at? Oh, hey, it's 1st and 10 from our own 40. Hey, they're giving us this on first down. And then you start to understand, okay, he's starting to understand what they're trying to do. First down call, 2nd and medium, 2nd and long, 2nd and short. And he can relay that to you. And I think that's the next progression for me is go up in the box, give me a thing, and come down at halftime. And I need a list like, all right, what are we doing? What are they taking away? What do we do? That kind of thing. And I think that's been pretty good for young guys, because I think a lot of guys think they need to be there so okay, especially young kids, they want to be in the game and screaming and yelling and everything and hugging the kids. But I think as a coach, you got to step yourself back. And we're all like that. I mean, I was like that. Heck, I was up and down a maniac on the sideline, always animated and everything. And as you become the head coach, the play caller, you sort of got to be, Coach, why are we running this week? We ran it 2 weeks in a row. I said, because the third game, I'm going to play action on first down. Or we run toss like we open at Atlantic Coast Mandarin. So in the kickoff classic, I ran toss first play. Well, against Mandarin, we ran toss reverse. Same formation. You know what I mean? So they're seeing you build it and set stuff up for the next thing. And I think that helps the young guys see it.
Yeah, Coach. I mean, that was a lot of my progression as a coach. I start off on the sideline, same thing like you said, did that stuff. And then I moved to the box. And, most people that know me will laugh when I say this, but obviously I was a very emotional guy. I still kind of am. And sitting in the box, just like you said, allowed me to kind of separate myself, be a much more analytical coach, write things down. This is the first time I started writing things down, right? When you're a young coach and you're a position coach on the sideline, you're not writing things down.
Right.
And then obviously with the advent of Huddle Sideline, I was able also to rewatch plays in a super calm environment without 100 people around me, crowd around an iPad. And now, right, I was able to be analytical, talk up there, do things with my head coach. Hey, I think we need to run cut next time they have this guy into the boundary because, we need to have some kind of double on him. We need to do this or that. So,
right.
I think, it's fun listening to this because if you're listening, we didn't do a pre-interview or anything, so this wasn't set up. But that was actually my progression as a young coach to a coordinator was young coach, box coach, coordinator. And to this day, I still like being in the box. It doesn't always work because sometimes I don't have guys that can signal as fast as I want.
Right.
But I love being in the box.
Yeah,
doesn't always work that way.
And the thing about the coach, and I was fortunate because, I had a couple of guys that had been with me a while, whether they were up or down. And they'd help me. Like our offensive guys would be on, and my D coordinator would be like, switch over on the thing and go, throw the fade and flip back over like in the middle of the game. Well, I know he knows because we've been together a while.
Yeah.
So he knows like these guys aren't telling you, throw the fade, run inside zone or whatever it is. But it would be funny, middle of the game, be like, go for two, And then there'd be times where they would be like, Coach, what should we do? Like, Coach, we got to back up. So the funny story about that, so I had a young guy, I ended up being a really good coach, his second year with me. And he was over there and he's in the box with me and we're playing at Reigns. And Reigns goes down the field. It's been like a 3-0 game until the fourth quarter. And we go back and forth and they score with like a minute 49 left and to take the lead by 8. And so they kick off. We fumble the kickoff. We get the ball on the 3-yard line. Oh, so I'm like, okay, man, let's go. What you got? What you got? And he's like, I'm like, hey, what you got? What you got? Make the call. What do you think? What do you think? And it's like crickets, like dead silence on the thing. So I call. We had the All-American kid, Carl Walker. So we get in a set we hadn't been in, and we just basically threw zone pass out of the gun. And he's a big old kid. He catch it, runs like 50 yards to the midfield thing. And all of a sudden, it's like, coach, run this. I'm like, okay, boys.
Back on, there we go.
Oh, okay. Now you want to call plays. Nobody want to call plays back that way. So most definitely, though. But
that's a great story right there. Yeah, and that was the piece of it was you learn how to make suggestions first from the box. Hey, coach, I'm seeing this. Think about this on the next drive. And I would do that a lot. Hey, coach, think about this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I would say. I go back to, hey, 3rd and 12 right hash. Hey, they're in this format. Hey, 21 personnel's coming in.
Right.
And then make suggestions. And as you do that, the head coach feels comfortable. And then the conversation happens in the offseason. Hey, how you feel about calling the plays? Well, hell, I feel real good because I've been up there doing this the whole time.
Right. And then don't get your feelings hurt when I change it on you. When it comes down from the top. And you're like, Coach, that's not what I call. I go, no, I got a gut. Let's do that. It worked, that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, that's why it's great being on the other side of the ball. Normally you don't get it changed. So that's, if you're a defensive guy, being with an offensive guy is good. But no, I'm with you. I would be the same way. I'd kind of look down at the head coach and the OC and I'd be like, go for it. I'd just walk off. And that was it. I'd just be like, I feel real confident. I should just go for it. It's 4th and 2, run it. Let's go.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a great thing. So, there's that transition stuff. So going into clinics, like you talked about, or when you go to a school, do you kind of have a conversation with your coaches going into that? Like, hey, let's make sure, we're looking to pull, a couple drills or this or that. Like, let's make sure we're learning 1 or 2 things. How does that kind of conversation go? Or what do you tell your coaches they should be looking?
Yeah. And so what I really enjoyed was going to like the spring practices, whether it was touch to the clinic or we were like, even when we had JU up there, just going over there with Kerwin and those guys and say, hey, I'm going to come over today and watch you guys throw this screen game. Can I get a couple minutes? Yeah, Coach Sully, come on. And so that's how I did it. It was just so much easier, I've learned a lot of offensive line play from Art Kehoe, Hugh Null when he was at Auburn, Trickett, of course. Trickett was the best, man. He'd be like, get the drill, Sully, get the effing drill, how Trick was. And I was the offensive line coach, so I always knew, like, my guys would be like, hey, let's do this, coach. And I was like, okay, how are we blocking it? Because everybody wants to call plays. Like nowadays, everybody thinks it's mad and you just call plays. But you better know how those guys up front are going to block it. We got to keep everything the same. And I think that's probably the best way to just tell them, look, you coach wide receivers. Go be the wide receivers coach best friend. Don't get in his way. Be there. Find a drill you like, because there's always something they do that you can translate to your kids. You can't worry about, the scheme or what they're doing, but you can worry about that drill to run the fade. I mean,
Yeah.
to run smash or to run the dig, and how they do and how they adjust, who they block, like the bubble, like throwing, like the tunnel out there. We're going to throw tunnel to the number 3 guy up top. Well, we used to make our guys, and I learned this at one of the camps, they would point to who they were blocking. So the guy catching the ball would point to tell the next guy who you got. So if he got the crap drilled out of him, it was his fault, because he told him to block the wrong guy. And I thought that was I think that was at South Florida when Canales was there. I thought that was so good, because instead of you dictating, oh, well, if he's here or there, no, I'm catching the ball. I'm going to protect me. So you block that guy, or you point to that guy. And so those were the things, as you went on, you could learn about and be able to translate to your kids something simple as that. So it was pretty easy.
Yeah, I think we always said, like, make sure you're the head coach of your position is always the big thing, was, go out and you find the drills and you do this. As a head coach or as a coordinator, obviously I want to talk to you about it. We're going to go through, I used to, as a DC, I'd have a big meeting. We walk through everyone's drills and talk about it. But like, look, I don't have time all off season to find 100 D line drills for you. You better go find those drills. I want to hear about them. I want to walk through. I want to talk about why we're doing them. But Bud, you got to go find them. So that's why we're sending you to clinics. That's why we're sending you to Florida State or Florida or Miami or all these places. Like, go do your job. And your job is to be the head coach of defensive line or linebackers or DBs or whatever it is. So I think that's a really great point there. And to exactly what you're talking about, look, getting film is a lot easier nowadays, but getting drill tape is still very hard. That's the one that's not out there very much. So it's important to take those visits.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, we used to find out too, and we had the advantage because of Jags. When Gene Smith was here, he gave us pretty much carte blanche. We'd come over for practice, so I'd always take my guys to that. And again, it wasn't to be in awe of the Jaguars. It was just go watch the wideout coach, how they're doing punt return, and he still got his guys, and they're working on a stick route, or they're working on controlling the ball on the fade and looking up over the shoulder. They're not just standing there watching special team period, because that used to drive me crazy. We'd be in this period, and then I'd see a coach I had a D-line coach one time. He coached the D-line, and during team, he'd stand on the sideline. Oh my God, I about lost my mind. So, but it's just, I think it's just the same. The other thing with the young guys is, they're going to be dumb, but they're going to be dumb energetically. You know what I mean? Like, coach, we don't do that. Like, we don't yell at the other team when he's on the field and say, man, you dropped that ball. We don't do that. That's how we do it. You know what I mean? But they're going to do that because their young guys are excited, and that's what they do. So you got to embrace that, but then you got to reel them in a little bit, make sure they understand their representation of the school and me and everything else.
Yeah, and that's a great example there. And again, if you're a young guy who's fiery, that's not a knock on you. Like, look, we've all been there. I was there. I can certainly tell people I was there. I've done some stupid things on the sideline that I can look back on it, 15 years later now, and I can crack a joke about it. But in the moment, it wasn't very funny. I'll tell you that. There's a couple times I was like, my head coach is about to freaking kill me. So I've been there a few times. So
that's the joke on the get back coach deal. Like, hey, I could fire him. Don't throw no flags on us for being on the field. I could fire that guy.
No, that's a great thing. And so, going through these aspects of it, and then when you get in with coaches, as you get in, so, we just talked about the off season. We talked about going to clinics. We talked about going to practices and developing that. Now, as you're going into spring or fall or whatever, those kind of pre-practice, and I don't mean like right before the practice, but like the preseason meetings.
Right.
What are you going through with these coaches and talking to them about development wise and things of that nature?
So like the offensive guys, it was easy because I coached the O-line, so I was always involved. And then I always had another guy that coached with me who was a first-year coach that I sort of developed. It actually worked out good because he was high energy and everything, but he was learning and so he came, and so I would be through the individual period, and then I could leave them to do pass pro and go to Skelly, and that way I could watch our DBs and watch our wideouts, and and our quarterbacks, and everything worked that way. So it worked out that way good for me. The defensive guys, as far as going in for my intensive purposes, is most of the time those guys handled their drill work and stuff. And I always used to tell our coach, look, you're going to coach your position. If I have to coach your position, you're not doing a very good job. I said, now, I would always go during team and stand in the secondary to help our secondary guy with his 4. He'd take the 2 on the one side, and and that way I could see the linebackers. But I wasn't over coaching on him. I was just coaching his points, especially when we put in palms for the first time, and we called it Okie. I can't remember what St. Augustine those guys called it, but when we were reading 2 and 3 in trips, Mini, yeah, we called it Okie because we didn't want to be yelling Mini because we played them a couple times all the time. And when we played them and we played palms, it was, the deal. That was what we called. We didn't call palms and signal palms. We signaled, the deal every time we played them. But those guys would just do their stuff. So the coordinator was more responsible for what they were doing and running it. And the one thing that I like what we used to do during, especially heading in the thing in our tackle circuit, was we would tackle circuit everybody early. So like in spring practice, we would tackle circuit everybody. Everybody went, our quarterbacks, our kickers, everybody went through that. And then we filmed that. So if somebody got hurt and said we didn't teach tackling to the quarterback, we can't get sued. I got it on film. We did it twice. We did it in the spring, and then we did it in the fall. We always did it, but at least they went through and knew how to wrap up and everything. But so those guys would do the tackle circuit stuff, and when we would do that every week, whatever it was, Tuesday usually during the season, and they'd have their little tackle circuit, and they'd do that. But they would run all those drills on the defensive side. And then usually offensively, it was pretty simple for what we did because, like I said, when I coached the O-line, I had a good quarterback guy and then a good wideout guy. And my running backs, we had running backs, so they were easy to coach.
So you said something in there that I think is really important that maybe we skipped over, using terminology. And that means that you guys took the time to set a terminology for everything and talk about how important that is to have shared terminology that everyone is using so they're on the same page.
Yeah, so we always used to say our cover 3 coverage was Leon because Leon Washington wore cover 3 for us. He played safety his last year with us.
Yeah.
And so when he left, we just, instead of saying, hey, it's cover 3, it was always Leon. So all our kids knew he wore 3 for generation every year, whatever. And so all our terminology was the same. So our guys, even though we would call something offensively, like we would be in Tiger right with the H-back and the tight end as the wing. So when we would script teams that would get something like that, our guys would draw it up as Tiger. So we would draw it up whether it was trips with the nub or tight end trips with the nub. They'd call it Tiger, so our kids would sort of understand that formational. So that's one of the things that I thought we did a good job of. As both sides of the ball. And then we would try to use the terminology defensively. If they were running scout and it was similar, we would do it. If it wasn't similar, we wouldn't do it. We would just call it like Bishop Kenny. Any 3-man stuff was Bishop Kenny in the scout stuff. So our kids would relate that to what it was.
First off, I love that you're dropping the alma mater here. No, I think that's a great point right there. And I've talked about that a few times, but when you guys share terminology and you're able to do scout team, and we had this at Oakleaf, me and Coach Avery, who's the OC at Bulls now.
Right.
He would be look at me and he'd be like, hey, run cover 6, which for us was weak rotation cover 3. We use Saban terms. But Avery was able to look at me and be like, hey, just hey, getting it 3-4, getting tight front, run 6 here. And I'm like, okay, perfect. And we're good. And we could yell it out to the kids. And vice versa, you can do that on offense. If I'm helping, run Scout O or Scout D or whatever, we were able to do all that stuff. So I think having that set terminology is good. But for the same thing, like you said, the coaching points matters too. You don't want me to call, I'm just going to use something really simple. You don't want me to call it spill and then you call it something completely different. And then the kids looking at both of us like, well, I don't know what the hell coaches want. Like, the head coach just told me one term that I know what it is. And then the assistant coaches tell me some term I've never heard of. Like, what the hell is he talking about?
Right. And that's like alignment too. Like, everybody one technique in the 2 and the 2-eye and the 3 and the 4-eye. You know what I mean? And so we did that also, the same thing. Our terminology was all the same as far as that went.
Coach, that's Funny you brought that up. My buddy is a big football fan. He's a lawyer, right? Big Florida State guy. And we were talking about it the other day. And he goes, that's a 5 tech, right? And I said, yeah. He goes, well, what is it when the guy's on a tight end? I go, that's 6. And he goes, so when he's outside, it's a 7. I go, no, that's a 9. And he goes, what's a 7? I go, technically when he's inside the tight end. And he looks at me and he goes, buddy, I have an advanced law degree and I have no idea why you number it like that. I said, me neither. I said, I don't know. Coach before me did it, right? And that's unfortunately how it works sometimes. I'm like, some coach that's older and way better than me told me that's how we did it. That's how we do it. All right.
Right. And it's funny because like nose guards and everything, it's like, well, that's a shade or that's a 1 and he's head up. I'm like, well, head up's a head up to me. It's not 0 because you could be head up on the guard too. That's head up. So.
Oh yeah. So that's always great talking that. Everyone's got different terms. I had someone the other day, we also write, and I'm like, look, at the beginning of every article, if I'm going to use my terminology, like I now put a disclaimer.
Right.
This is my terminology. If it doesn't fit yours, that's fine. Just apply yours. And we call all of our simulated pressures and creepers a quarterback name. I said, well, this is Newton, and somebody DMs me, and he's a great coach at DMA. Trust me, I really respect this guy. He's like, hey man, that's Favre. And I'm like, totally understand. For us, that's the nickel. We use an in, right? An in quarterback. Cam Newton's the most famous in quarterback lately. There we go, right? If it's the corner, it's Carr, right? Because Derek Carr, so. And it was so funny. I'm like, Coach, I know you're right. I know it's Favre. That's the Aranda thing. It's from the field. But like for us, this is how we keep it simple for our kids. So it's always funny how that works out with terminology. But
well, what I found funny as the years went on is we all our 4 wide or 11 personnel or 2x2s or 20 personnel or whatever. Everybody over the years have changed. Well, we just one word tagged all that stuff, just like all our routes. So like mesh for us was cross or canes, depending on who we wanted to go over and under. You know what I mean? And so we just would tag one names, and people are like, well, why don't you call it like you call your 50 series? You call your 50 series, 56 wheel. Post wheel for us. That was post wheel. And I'm like, because that's our under center or our 5-step drop. 7-step drop, whatever terminology, but our gun package is going to be just one name, so we can signal it and they can go and I can change it and that kind of stuff. So and that's what a lot of guys nowadays are doing as far as that. But heck, we've been doing that forever. I didn't even know I was supposed to do that.
It's always a story. I've told this story 100 times, but the one time I'm like, hey, I came up with this, right? We're gonna, just like you said, we're gonna run palm strong. We're gonna bring one guy week and run man week. I was like, hey, I've never really seen anybody run this. And I swear to God, like 2 weeks later, someone tweets it. I'm like, it's Big 12 pressures. Saban's been doing it for 10 years. I'm like, and that was the moment when I was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm never going to act like I've ever even come near creating something again, because it was 2 weeks later and I was like, I felt really good. I was like, oh, I finally came up with something in football that's mine. No, it's not. And so if you're out there and you're a young coach, it's a great lesson. Someone else has already done it.
They just call it something else.
Go learn from them. Yeah. And figure it out. Right.
Yeah. Well, it's funny to me is like the bunch stuff. When the bunch stuff was coming, everybody started getting in the tight bunch because they started throwing a little bit more, probably middle 2000s, I would say. And so we couldn't, like, we were always like checking the this or checking the that. And so Mike Smith was the D coordinator for the Jags, and I've known Mike for a bunch of years. So I said, hey, man, can we get together on your bunch stuff? Can I bring my D coordinator? And he's like, yeah. So we went to Hooters. It was Mike Smith, Joe Cullen, who's, with the Chiefs, and then me and my DC. And so Mike goes through the whole package, the whole deal on now we couldn't do it all, but 3 of the things he did, we did from then on, and it was phenomenal. And we had really good success in that bunch package because of what he did. He said, it's brain dead. And I said, here's what we get. Boom, boom, and boom. And he's like, play it this way. And then, we're sinking zone first to the flat, that kind of stuff. But that was the evolution because we needed help with that. And so I went to the guy that they see it in the NFL all the time that I knew personally that we could get it taken care of.
Yeah. And again, if you happen to be, I know we're gearing this towards, some head coaches and other people, but, if you're a young coach or even if you're a head coach, like listen to what Coach Sullivan just said. If you don't have an answer, go out and ask people.
Find somebody.
Don't be stubborn about it. And now you have Twitter, which is the greatest tool for a coach in the world. If you tweet a question out, I promise you 30 coaches will respond to it. Right. I tweeted something out today about how I'm, a buddy of mine was like, "Hey, I really want to learn this dash concept that people are using. It's, part of like they kind of drop, read one side, and then do sprint out. I guess is what it is. I'm a defensive guy, so if I'm wrong, please don't be in the comments at me." I just tweeted, "Hey, we're looking for somebody to talk about the dash concept." Coach, I got like 11 DMs in 15 minutes.
Oh, that's good.
And so all these guys are like, "Hey, I'm ready. Let's go." So we're going to have that episode on the podcast. But again, if you're a coach and you don't have an answer, just go out there and ask on Twitter. Someone will answer it. All right. Like, the coaching community is great.
Yeah. And the beauty of that is if you get 11 different opinions, you may find the one that fits into what you want to do. And then you convert
now you get to filter it.
Right. You can filter like, no, I don't like that. I don't like how they call it. Oh, I like how he calls that. But I don't like you could build it your own way that way. And that's the beauty of it. And we were one of the first people up here to really make the commitment to run inside zone. And when I first started running inside zone, I ran it as draw. So we ran outside zone, but my inside zone was draw because I wasn't comfortable enough figuring it out, making sure I understood where the doubles were, where the insert was, how we were blocking it. And again, it's just off season. I'm going to learn to run inside zone because we're always going to have a back. And so we did. And we always start with 2-back principle in what we did. And then we would eventually evolve to the 1-back stuff. But we always everything was started in 2-back principle for me because that's how I taught our base offense. Where some guys come out and they start 11 personnel day one and then running inside zone. Not me. We were basically going to be in 12 personnel at the start in that. But that just was me, how I taught and how we did things.
Yeah, I mean, I still start my defense, and we slightly different. We start in 20 personnel is where we start teaching now. But fun little thing. Just random question. Where'd you go to learn some inside zone stuff? Who'd you go to?
Trickett.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, Trickett inside zone, Kehoe inside zone, and Kehoe taught me a lot of little games. So we used to run when we first started running inside zone. You're gonna block the 3, and we're gonna get on the back, and we're gonna double the. So we started folding that nose. We called it log, lead opposite guard. That's how we first started doing it. And as we got over the years, as we got better, the kids could make the call and do so many different things with it. Where we would fold the center around the 3 or down the tackle fold, but it was still our base inside zone principle. It's just we would change it a little bit as each week.
Yeah. No, I know. I heard inside zone. I said, I bet at some point he hung out with Trickett.
It was easy to get to. Trickett was easy. I mean, like, Coach, I want to get the ins and out. But Kehoe was great. But really, everybody offensive line, like even when I went to the convention, like they'd always have an offensive. I'd always go to the offensive line thing and just listen to people. It's just like 2 years ago, I went and listened to Brandon Marion, now that's at Sacramento State, with his go-go thing. And I'm like, my God, I love this guy. He's in the eye running RPOs out of the gun. I'm like, oh my God. I should have been back now. I should have been getting the eye stuff back now. It was good. You know what I mean? I was just so enamored with it, and fascinated, and just made me think like, gosh, that is so, because it's really simple what they're doing. But there's like 3 options every play. It was really good stuff.
Well, and that's what it is, right? Football is not coming up with something new. It's evolving something old, right? Yeah. It's like, hey, how can I take a concept that's maybe 8 or 10 years old and let's update a little? So let's give it a wrinkle. But like you said, hey, it's still this in the core.
Right.
But we're doing something different, right?
And that's the inside zone duo debate. Is it inside zone or is it duo? And I read that on Twitter today. You take something old and make it new.
I tag film. I may watch more film than anybody in the country, and I'll have that argument with people because that's all I do right now during the day when I'm not working. My CEO's listening. I'm working on my job. But I tag film usually 3 or 4 hours every night. And to this day, I'm like, look, I don't, people told me, well, if they block the backside in, it's duo. If they don't, it's inside. And I try to do that. And I'm like, sometimes it looks like, even though they block the end, it still looks like zone insert. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. So I still can't identify the difference. If anyone's out there and you want to teach me, if anyone's out there and wants to come on the podcast and really hit me with duo, that'd be great. Cause I don't know, Coach. I still can't identify it, to be honest with you.
It's really like, I think it becomes the 1-back stuff with the RPO off of it that helps with the duo. Depends on what you want to do. You want to read you want to read the Mike linebacker, B-gap player, turn out and zone everything front, and then throw the glance or whatever on the backside or the slant. So I think it's all evolved, but it's been fun for me to sort of evolve before I got out different things we did off of inside zone.
Yeah, it's been for me, it's been fun too. I think I've learned more about football in the last 3 years not coaching than when I did coach every year.
Because you got more time. And you're not in the weight room, and you're not running after Johnny Joe, and mom's not calling you at night complaining about him not going D1 when he's 5'9", 157.
Yeah, you're right. And then I've gotten the blessing of talking to 2-3 coaches every week for 2 years now. We're going on 2 years of the podcast and a bunch of films. So it's like, man, I'm just learning from other coaches. I keep telling the joke. I'm like, when I go back, I'm gonna be ready. All right. When I go back, I'm ready.
Yeah, really, especially now, though. I mean, you could go on, like you said, on Twitter, and somebody's got a post of the Chiefs game the other night, and you're like, oh, my God, how'd Josh Allen throw that ball 40 yards, even though it, ended the game? They catch that ball. It's the greatest play in the history of Buffalo Bills, And
if you're listening, here's the difference between an offensive and a defensive coach. When I hear that play, all I'm thinking about is the great corner pressure there, right? Corner through the B gap. So.
And it was
we remember that play 2 different ways, Coach.
Right, but it was both sides. It was a great call. Spags is going to blitz you in a bunch set, but they just brought it a little differently than they had done it, and that's why he's so good.
Oh yeah, it's him and Fangio in the Super Bowl. That's going to be one heck of a defensive Super Bowl right there.
It's going to be. It should be good. I think it's going to be really good. I think the Eagles are really good.
Yeah. I suffer from I don't like either team. I'm still going to watch I'm not one of those people who's like, I'm going to watch every second of it.
Oh, yeah.
But boy, I don't care who wins. I really don't.
No, I haven't cared. I really haven't cared. I've enjoyed watching. That was the beauty of watching the NCAA, the 12, the playoff.
Yeah.
I didn't have a dog in the fight. So I literally could watch the games and enjoy, and not having, this guy's on his third school. Didn't bother me because it wasn't my team. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, if you're me this year, Coach, you had no teams. Florida State had 2 wins, and the Jags had 4? So I was out of the gate from the get-go. I didn't have to worry about college football or pro. So
yeah,
a tough year for me, Coach.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, my daughter works at Florida State. She's athletic trainer for women's soccer. So
now they win.
Yeah.
They win a lot.
Not this year. They got beaten the earliest that they've had in a while.
Wow.
Yeah. But they did win the ACC, though. But yeah, she's got 2 national championships.
Yeah, good for her. I was there for 1, but the good days, the Jameis days, right? So
yeah.
So kind of wrapping this up, Coach. I appreciate you coming on tonight. It's just so awesome to get a coach with so many years of knowledge. And you and I have known each other forever since my playing career, but since the very beginning of my coaching career. We've had some ties, so it's been really cool to swing back around and talk to you years later.
Right.
I'm further down the road as a coach. So we ask every coach this, and it'll be a little different for you. But we say, because you're not with the program right now, but you can think over your programs. What's the coolest or most unique thing that you guys did at any program that you were a part of? And this can be an off the field thing. It can be an on the field thing. You can share a few if you want, because you've been at several. But what's the most unique or coolest thing that other coaches should hear that you guys did?
All right. So this is a funny story. So my priest in 2003 was commissioned to go to Fallujah, and he was a medic. And so he didn't want to do it. He had actually retired, but they told me he couldn't retire. So he ended up going, and in 9 months he was in Fallujah in the hospital, like service 1,200 people that had died. So he had a palm cross. And on this palm cross he had is everybody that he administered to for 9 months. He rubbed their sweat or blood on this palm cross, and it's teak wood, it's olive wood, so the sweat keeps it moist. And so when he got back, he tells me the story because they used to feed us for our team meal. One of the things, so he gives me the palm cross, and so on Thursday, I would tell this story to our kids after practice, and then I would pass that palm cross around. And every kid that played with me from 2004 on rubbed their sweat on that palm cross. It became a really big thing in our program. And the kids nowadays will tell you. So here's the funniest story, is so when I retire and I'm not coaching, I end up giving the coach the cross to Coach Foy. We do a little thing before spring practice when they retire or name the field. And so I ended up tattooing it on myself.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's a part of me. So that in itself is an interesting story about
that is
about
unique,
that.
Coach. That is one of the most unique stories we've gotten right there.
Yeah. So to me, that to me has been something that I thought that because we not only student athlete coach, but I thought we always every week we had a little spiritual thing. And the kids, like if I left it in the office out there, I'd be like, oh, hold on. And I'd got to run back in and get it. And then they'd had it. And then of course I kept it on me, in the building and everything. But it was a neat thing, really neat thing.
Coach, that's a phenomenal story. And I love the fact that you ended it with it being tattooed on you. And I think that's such a cool story that you can tell, for the rest of your life. And that's just the passionate thing of Coach right there, right?
Right.
Hey, what's your tattoo? Oh, let me tell you this story about this tattoo.
And
right?
the funny thing is we were at Western Carolina watching them play this year, and a buddy of mine's son is a backup quarterback at Palahiggy, played at Carlo Gibbons. And so his wife, I used to take to school when she was a ninth grader and I was a senior. She lived in my neighborhood. So we're sitting there and she looks up and she goes, what is that tattoo on your arm? And so then I get to tell the story about it and everybody's like, no way. I'm like, oh yeah. Yeah. I said, kids will tell you if I post that cross on Twitter, they'll be like, oh man, that was some good stuff. Cause it was just sort of like our thing, but every kid from 4 to when I got out in 18 rubbed their sweat on that. That was pretty neat.
That's phenomenal, Coach. Well, Coach, I appreciate you coming on the podcast tonight. It's such a pleasure to catch up with you as always. You're always welcome here, and anything we can ever do for you, you let us know. All right.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Enjoyed it. All right, Kyle,
great.
Thanks.
All right, Coach. Well, you have a great night. It's great having you on. And for those of you listening, we'll see you next week.